How does our perception of aging impact our health? And have you stopped to think about what the later years of your life will look like? Today, we're talking about a topic that touches each of us directly or indirectly. Aging is a journey that we all will go on, but how often do we pause to really understand what it entails, not just for ourselves, but also those that we love? Joining me today is a special guest, Dr. Rosanne Leipzig, an internationally recognized geriatrician with over 40 years of experience in the field. Her journey into geriatrics is not just professional, but deeply personal, inspired by her grandmother, who showed her that no matter your age, life can be rich and full. She holds the prestigious title of Gerald and May Ellen Ritter Professor and Vice Chair Emerita of the Brookdale Department of Geriatrics and Palliative Medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, with numerous accolades to her name and appearances on prominent media platforms such as The Today Show, CBS Evening News, CBS Sunday Morning, CNN, and AARP Webinars, and also in notable publications such as Time Magazine, the New York Times, and more. Dr. Leipzig brings her knowledge shaped by a career dedicated to improving how we approach aging. Today, we'll explore her latest book, Honest Aging, An Insider's Guide to the Second Half of Life, published by the Johns Hopkins University Press. The book is a candid look at what aging really involves physically, psychologically, functionally, emotionally, and how we adapt to these changes. Through a mix of scientific insights, patient stories, and Dr. Leipzig's own experiences, the book challenges common myths and provides invaluable tools for anyone navigating or caring for someone in their later years. And as Martha Stewart said about the book, it is essential reading for anyone who is growing older and whose loved ones are growing older. In other words, all of us. Join us as we approach aging with more awareness, compassion, and being prepared. Here is my interview with Dr. Rosemary Leipzig. Dr. Rosanne, we are just so excited to have you here. I read your book. It was so good. I read it in a day.
My God.
It was great. So thank you for being here with me and joining us. I'm excited to learn about a little bit about your background and your journey into geriatrics, how your personal experience has really shaped your approach to aging. So welcome.
Thank you. I don't think there's anybody involved like you in geriatrics and gerontology who didn't have a personal relationship in some way.
Right.
So for me also, it was a grandmother. Okay.
Mm,
And my grandmother came to live with us when I was, maybe 3 or 4. She
wow.
had colon cancer and had a colostomy. And this was back in the 50s, and the bags were not very good, and she needed help. So she came and she lived with us, and she stayed with us for about 7 or 8 years. So that was really formative in my growing up. And I just saw this woman who had medical problems, but was so vibrant.
Right.
And she volunteered, she baked and cooked, she had friends, just had a wonderful life. And I always say if somebody had asked her about growing old, she would have said, it's what you make of it.
Right.
It's up to you.
It is. It is. Yes. My grandma always said, growing old isn't for sissies.
It isn't.
Yeah,
But our society makes it a little worse than it needs to be, I think.
I agree. I agree. Oh, I love that we share that connection of, both having our grandmothers move in to our homes. I think that it shapes your lens on the world and growing older and relationships. I always say it when you are caring for loved ones, it teaches us even more about ourselves in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does. So I'm so curious. I love learning a little bit of history around your book, Honest Aging, An Insider's Guide to the Second Half of Life. It offers this perspective on what it means to grow older. What inspired you to write the book, and what do you hope we're going to pull from it and walk away with?
Well, it's interesting. I wrote the book because I keep being asked questions whenever anybody finds out what I do.
Hmm.
Whether I'm on an airplane or at a cocktail party, whatever, they look at me and they start asking questions like, this is happening to me as I get older. Is this normal?
Yeah.
And in fact, I almost named the book, Is This Normal? Okay.
Yes, yes.
And I started looking around, and my inspiration is from those people and my patients who sometimes came to me being very nervous and upset about something that is normal, but
Mm,
they didn't know it.
right.
Okay. And they wanted it changed. They wanted to do something about it. And sometimes there's not anything you can do to
Hmm.
change some of these things. So, I've cared for thousands of patients, and I thought it would be really helpful for them to know what to expect. So, my inspiration is that book by Arlene Eisenberg and her daughters, What to Expect When You're Expecting,
Oh,
okay?
yes, yes.
Only for aging. All right.
Mhm.
As to what I hope people will walk away from, I hope they'll recognize that aging is an incredible gift.
Mhm.
Okay, as you and I were talking about a few minutes ago, in 1900, median life expectancy was 47.
Mm.
Okay, now at birth, median life expectancy is 78. And if you're 65, half of people are going to live to almost 85 or more.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, it's a whole new world. Aging is not a four-letter word.
Mm.
Okay, and our society tends to treat it that way. The truth is, you need to adapt, but most of us are going to live into old age and we're going to be in pretty good shape. So that's what I hope that people leave this conversation with and leave the book with, is a sense that being negative about aging just influences your aging process in the wrong direction.
It does. It does. And I think one of the sentences I remember pulling out of the book was it's important that we have our perception and our perspective on aging because it does determine how we'll live,
Yes,
right?
absolutely true.
Yeah.
There is a psychologist up at Yale. You may have had her on your show. I don't know, Becca Levy, but
I don't think so yet. Yes.
okay. But she's done some wonderful studies about how our perceptions of age influence what we let ourselves do as we get older. And so she, just a couple of studies, she took people who were in their middle age and got a read on whether they were more negative or positive about aging and followed them into old age. And she found that those people who had positive perceptions lived 7.5 years longer
Wow.
and better. And then she took people who were 65 and older, had them do something in front of a computer, and sent them messages subliminally that were either negative or positive about aging. And after that, she gave them hearing tests and memory tests. Now, I've been a doctor for over 40 years. I always thought those were objective. How you did on your hearing test today would be how you did on your hearing test next month, unless something terrible happened. What she found was that the people who were given negative perceptions of aging did worse on their memory tests and their hearing tests. It's kind of
Fascinating.
like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
So
Wow.
it's really important that you know, get a positive attitude
Yeah.
and take it with you into
Right.
aging. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's so much more conversation around that too. The whole idea of those limiting beliefs, right, that we might have, and how our brain health and how we can rewire in a way when we tell ourselves those positive messages versus those negative messages. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that to be true with all of the patients that you've seen in practice with.
Yeah, and I've worked with them to try and with my trainees to try and change the message.
Mm. I'm so
When I
glad.
have somebody who comes in and I give them hope
Mm.
and I say, you're a real role model, they
Wow.
perk up, you know,
Oh,
and I
we
think it
need
really
you
has.
everywhere. Oh, we do. We need you everywhere in that voice telling us that. Well, one of the things I was thinking through was that hope in life in general is so vital because if we don't have the hope of anything, whether it's to look forward to or do or engage in, right? It's that like purpose piece. Then why would we continue, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important. I have had people who have retired, and then I've seen them there's one guy in particular. I saw him about, I don't know, 8, 10 weeks after he retired. And he was just grumbling. Okay, I was glad I wasn't his wife. I mean, she was just, what am I supposed to do? There's nothing to do. And I said to him, did you retire unexpectedly?
Mm,
And he said, no. I said, when did you know you were going to retire at 65? He said, I've always known I was going to retire at 65. I said, and you didn't try and figure out what you're going to do afterwards?
wow, that's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because throughout our lives, we always have a game plan for
Mm,
what's next. But
yeah,
many of us don't have that game plan for after we finished our work career or raising our families or whatever that is.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yet that could be 20 to 40 years.
Right,
You know?
right. And we know it's coming. It's like how you said you referenced the what to expect when you're expecting,
Yes.
right? We
Yeah.
plan for, having children and plan for potentially college or career, things like that.
Yeah.
Why are we not doing a better job of looking and planning for that later time?
Yeah. And it's interesting because when people do plan, oftentimes it's around finances.
That's very true. Yeah.
It's not around them. What are
Mm,
they going to do?
yeah.
What's going to make their life meaningful?
Have you seen an evolution in your own perception of aging during the lifespan of your career?
Yeah. So, I got into this when I was in my early 30s, and I'll be 73 next month. So
Mm,
that's a fair amount of time to make some changes.
yeah.
And there's a statesman whose name was Bernard Baruch, and he was asked, at what age is somebody old? And he said, for me, old age is always 15 years older than I am. And I found that to be so true because when I was in my 30s, and somebody was having a 50th birthday party, I was
Mm,
like, oh my God, how can they be that old?
yeah.
And now, when somebody's having a 50th birthday party, it's, oh my God, how can they be so young? You know?
Oh, isn't that
Perception.
true? It is. It is perspective. I know. I'm going to be 45 this fall. And when I look back, when I was graduating from high school and my parents, I thought were so much older than I was, and they were in their late 40s. I'm like, here I am.
Yes. It's
Right.
amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it is amazing. Wow. It
Yeah.
is. There's a treasure trove of information in your book. So I'm going to preface this conversation by saying everyone needs to buy it. And there are so many directions we could take this conversation and so many questions I want to ask, which are all in the book. So people will need to dive in. And what I loved is that you posed all of those questions. And like you said, when people meet you and they find out what you do and have all these questions they want to ask you, it's like the book was that living, walking example of that, Q&A. Here, I've got all these questions, and then we have that can share that with us. And I loved how it was set up as such a resource where any topic, any keyword, information around such a variety of things that affect us as we're aging. It's not only searchable in the back, and we can find then the page number to reference it, but it also walked through so easy to read, and that the sections take us through information about what's normal aging and what's not normal aging, and the bottom line, and what resources we can pull out. We can deep dive into that a little bit more. And also, one of my favorites was, advice for the loved one. And being able to look at that from that perspective, which I think we're always navigating those waters with people in our life, whether it's family, whether it's friends, colleagues, all of it. So,
Absolutely.
um, thank you. Thank you for putting that out into the world.
Yeah.
Talking about what's normal, what's not normal. Are there, and I know that's a big question. And because we could talk about those two questions related to every aspect of aging, but what are some of those key questions or differentiating factors that people come to you with maybe the most? And
So
just give us a little insight.
Yeah, I'll give you. So there's certain things, the way that I think about this, there are certain things that happen to everybody as they age. They may not happen in the same order and they may not happen to the same degree, but it happens to all of us.
Right.
So for example, all of us are going to walk more slowly as we get older. Doesn't matter how hard you try. If you run the Boston Marathon and you're 80, it's going to take you longer than if you're 20. Okay? Even if you're running, not walking.
Yeah.
We have flabby arms and a pot belly. That's life, okay? There's reasons, but that's a part, everybody has this happening. You get more sensitive to medications. You're going to get up more to urinate at night, whether you've got a prostate or not. Sorry, women. You're going to be less thirsty, even though you're dehydrated, which is a big thing now with climate change. And you think you're not thirsty, but you should be drinking, even though you don't feel it, because older people don't feel it as much. So there are lots of things like that that happen as people get older that are quote unquote normal. Not necessarily that they're helpful, okay? But that's what happens. And that's why the importance of being able to adapt to this new normal that you're living in.
Right.
So that's kind of that one piece. And then when does it switch into something that's not normal? Okay. And I think I put in the book a bunch of red flags. If this happens, this is not normal, go see somebody. But I think there's also the biggest question I get asked is, I couldn't remember X. Am I starting to have dementia? Okay. And we live in a society that is very scared, and we're scared for good reason.
Yeah.
Not that we have had a decrease in the incidence of dementia, okay, over the past 10 or 15 years, because heart health is brain health.
Yeah.
And all these good things we've been doing for our hearts are good for our brains, and it decreases the percentage of people with dementia. But the number of people getting older is really increasing. So that percent will be a higher number of people in our society.
Right.
And we've all seen somebody who has lost short-term memory. And then if you're unlucky, you have seen someone progress to the end stages of dementia. And it's a horrible illness.
Yeah.
So everybody is rightly concerned about it. And a lot of work is going into trying to do something about it. So my one-liner on this is, if you're watching a movie and you see that guy and you know that guy and you just can't come up with his name, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you say Clark Gable, all right? Or somebody tells you it's Clark Gable and 2 days later you say it was Clark Gable.
Yeah.
That is not dementia. That's what's called a senior moment, because dementia is a problem with new learning, with storing something in your brain. And people have no recollection because they didn't store it in their brain.
Right.
This senior moment is a problem with recalling it. It's kind of like having a fishing pole and trying to get it back out again.
There's factors with that too, would you say? It depends on, I know when I'm doing something, well, for me, it's like losing my car keys. And then I'm like, I know I put them somewhere. I don't know where they went. But I realized, okay, I was distracted. I was multitasking, so those outside factors eliminated my ability to
Yeah,
really
there's
remember.
that.
Yeah.
And actually, as you get older, there are changes cognitively with aging. So you do have to work harder to learn new things, okay? You need to pay more attention. You can't multitask if anybody can multitask. I'm not sure anybody can. It takes longer to process, okay? Your reaction times are slower. You don't do as well under pressure. So for those loved ones who are on the podcast, standing there and waiting for the answer is not going to help, okay?
Right.
Give somebody the time to fill out the form or whatever they need to do without feeling that pressure.
Yeah.
And it's more difficult to do things in your brain. So calculating a tip or figuring out the route from one place to another is harder as you get older. So it's real. There are changes, but a lot of those things, there are strategies, So we have GPSs now. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know
Exactly.
about where you live. Where I live, they give you this choice of tips on the check. so you don't have to do it in your head anymore.
Yeah. So helpful, all those tools. It is. Do you find that there are family members that will come in and have questions for you as well, that they might have concerns? Are their top concerns related around the memory loss or some of those cognitive changes?
That's the biggest piece.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because I think for most people, there's a trajectory that they see if this is the start, and it changes everybody's life.
it does. Yeah, and it's proactive on their part to be able to pursue that and to ask questions from you. Yeah.
But the other thing to do is to realize that there are things that we can do to help our memories. And you mentioned one in terms of attention.
Mhm.
Okay. Hearing. I have a bunch of people who don't want to use hearing aids. I'm an early adapter. Okay. Adopter. I got mine at 60. All right. And they
Yeah.
changed my life.
Right.
They really did. And I think people need to realize if you can't hear it, it doesn't get into your memory.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah,
So, some people have selective hearing. That's another story.
that's
They don't
right.
get certain, but,
That's true.
you know, but
Uh,
there's also a relationship between hearing and dementia.
mm,
And we don't have studies that make it clear yet whether wearing hearing aids will decrease that relationship. But I will tell you, it decreases the energy you put into trying to hear. And
mm.
I found I had a lot more energy to do other things.
Oh,
I
interesting.
didn't have to spend so much energy trying to lip read and, do
Oh,
this,
yeah.
right?
Yes, when you think of that mental load, right, of then trying to put all of that energy into that. Yeah. I once had a guest share with me about hearing aids in particular, and he was like, don't treat them like the crown jewels of England where you only pull them out for special occasions.
It is so true.
Yeah.
Really true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, wear them all the time. Oh, that's such good advice. So I love those tips. Is there anything else you would add to that of like what you recommend or find to be really helpful, whether it's around memory, hearing, things like that?
I think people don't recognize how important sleep is,
Mm,
and for memory as well.
right.
When I was in medical school, I learned this. I didn't plan to, but I found that when I was memorizing all this stuff for medical school, if I went over it right before I went to sleep, my brain consolidated it. That's the word they use. I didn't know that then.
Okay.
Got it into storage, and I had it in the morning.
Wow.
Easy. So
Wow.
our brains work for us when we're sleeping, but we need to sleep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they do. You know what? I don't think I've ever told anyone this story, but when I was in college, I was a very good student, but I think in this particular case, I had not planned ahead very well, and I needed to study for a test. And this is, I'm dating myself, but back then we had like the big, tape player boombox situation. And I had recorded myself the notes for this test audio, and then I played it when I went to sleep. The problem is that I was sleeping, I wasn't listening.
Yes.
I should have done what you did and studied ahead of time, and then I'd gone to bed, but I was like, "Maybe in my subconscious, I'll absorb it." Well, I did not.
It would have
I
been wonderful though.
know. I was like, did not do very well on that test, but you know what? I tested that theory. It didn't work out for me, but now I know, okay, absorb. Maybe that's why people read before bed. It's like you read, absorb that, you retain it.
Yeah.
All the things we do. Oh my goodness. And being proactive about our health is so important. Are there top ways or things that you've witnessed where we can be proactive about our health? What are those important
Yes.
health screenings that you recommend that we should not bypass?
So I don't call them screenings in general. It's more things that you should just put on your list for regular things to do. Your
Okay.
checkup.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Prevention. So the first thing is I don't think people understand the concept of frailty, which is really important as you get older. So what is frailty? It's that you lose reserve. You can't deal with trauma to the body, to the brain, acute illnesses, chronic illnesses, as well as you could before. Okay. And the biggest piece to that has to do with your muscles and something called sarcopenia, which means sarcomusclepenia, too little. All right. So as you get older, you lose muscle mass and strength. And do you know what age that starts at? Did they teach you that in school?
30?
Yes.
Okay.
They taught you well. All right. And
Somehow I retained that.
yes, you probably learned it before you went to sleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then as you get older, you lose some every year, and that's normal aging. Okay. However, you can lose a lot more than that, and that's called sarcopenia. And when that happens, you can't do as much as you used to be able to do. You don't walk, you walk even slower, you're more exhausted, you don't want to do more, you do less, you lose more muscle, and it's a cycle.
Mm.
And you got to break that cycle by not letting the sarcopenia happen to begin with. And so during the pandemic, we became couch potatoes.
Yeah.
At least a lot of us did. Okay. And I noticed for myself when I came back to work, my hospital has a lot of stairs that you climb up when you enter. And it was a lot harder than it had been before the pandemic. And I was starting to have a problem. And I think we need to recognize that inactivity is really the enemy. Got to keep your body moving, even if it's walking. Just do it regularly and do it a little more every day. It makes a big difference. So that would be my first thing. My second is socialize. Another pandemic lesson. Okay. People who got isolated and lonely did not do well. And there's some studies that suggest that it was as much of a risk factor for mortality as smoking cigarettes.
Wow.
Okay. So I think community is something that we've lost and we need to get back. We're so busy on our own little treadmills that we really need to find places where we have like-minded folks, and it doesn't have to be the best friend in the world. It can be somebody that you say hi to and you can borrow sugar from to start, or, it's an election year. If you want to do a political campaign, whatever it is, it's a nice place to meet people. But finding, that we used to have a lot more of that than we have now. So that would be my second. My third, get your eyes tested every year, at the most every 2 years. And the reason I say that is because the things that will rob you of your vision, glaucoma and macular degeneration, have a lot of warning if somebody's looking in your eye. But by the time you lose vision, you've lost a lot.
Wow.
So you want to go before you have a problem for that.
Yeah.
Same with the teeth. Teeth are real important. Okay. You want to be able to eat things. You want to be able to have your face shaped in a certain way. It's really important that you get your teeth well taken care of. And we're learning that inflammation is a big problem in terms of cardiac disease and strokes and things like that. Tooth inflammation can be pretty asymptomatic. Again, you don't quite recognize that it's a problem until the dentist gets in there and says, oh, all right, there's a problem here.
Yeah. Would you say that when things happen in our mouth or with our teeth, is that like a precursor or like a warning sign to something deeper that's going on? Like you mentioned, like heart health or things like that?
Not necessarily, but it can make those things worse. So I think it's really important to get it fixed.
Yep. Okay, that's so good to know.
Yeah.
There are so many parts of your book going through, like you mentioned, sleep and balance and our minds. You also talk about the gut, gut feelings, which I feel like it's having kind of a moment right now. What did you say in our conversation? What are some of those points that you want to come across in regards to that?
The gut itself?
Yeah.
So there's several things. One is your gut doesn't naturally slow down as you're getting older. It
Mm,
slows down because of medications. It slows down because you're not drinking enough fluid. It slows down because you're not moving.
mm,
Okay. You're not having enough fiber. So those are important things to do to keep yourself quote unquote regular. All
right,
right.
right.
Um, there's a lot of discussion about the probiotics and what's happening with the bacterial environment in our guts. And I think we don't know a lot.
Mhm.
But I am one person, if I give patients antibiotics for any period of time, I have them use probiotics. I think that's important.
Yep, yep, kind of counteract that.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
I've had some patients who late in life become lactose intolerant.
Mm.
They start having loose bowels, and that can be a real downer.
Right.
Okay.
It's gonna make you not want to leave the house, go out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's embarrassing. It's terrible. So, they have to go on either the pills or decrease the dairy in their diet. So there are a lot of things, but the biggest thing is to make sure if you have a problem there, get it checked out. And then my second point on that, which I just have to say,
Yes.
is you don't have to be as thin as you think you need to be.
Mm.
Okay? We have a society that has made thinness into royalty or being a god or something.
Yeah.
And as you get older, it can be a real problem
Interesting. How is that, or why is that?
because you need food is fuel.
Mm.
And if you want energy, you need to have the fuel. You need a little bit of hip protection if you're going to fall. Okay.
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, yes.
So it's very interesting. We use BMI, the body mass index. It's
Mhm.
a way to say you're obese, you have major obesity, you're overweight, you're normal, or you're underweight. And what they've found is in older people who are overweight or obese, they do just as well as normal people when they're older.
Mm.
And it's unclear why. There are possibilities. Okay, I'm not going to get into that right now. But I think it's important because if your weight is making it impossible for you to do something you need to do, so if you have knee arthritis and you're heavy, you need to get rid of some of that weight so your knees feel better.
Right.
Okay. Or if you have, diabetes, obviously, you need to do something. Think about if you really need to lose it. Okay. And certainly don't think you have to be the weight you were when you graduated college, you know?
Yep. We change. We do.
Right. People
Yeah.
who are too thin do poorly.
Mm.
Don't have
Interesting.
the reserve. They're more likely to be frail. Not always, but more likely.
So interesting. I didn't actually really put that together, but that makes sense. Would you say that kind of along those lines, when we talk about balance or falling, I know that that's one major event that can really change the course of our lives and how we,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Um, so I find this whole thing fascinating because it really shows what the field of geriatrics has figured out. Okay.
Mm.
When I was in training, falls were not a medical problem. They were a
Interesting.
nursing problem. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
And some very smart people, one a very close friend of mine, said, this is a big problem. People are hurting themselves, it's changing their lives. If you hit your head, it could be the end. There's a lot, everybody knows somebody who had a hip fracture and it was the start of the beginning of the end. She started looking, my friend started looking at these different factors that might have something to do with falling. And we're a disease-oriented world. We're an organ-oriented profession. And so
Mm.
it should be one organ causes this problem. All right. It's not so with so many things that affect older people. And the term we use is a syndrome that is multifactorial. There are
Mm.
many factors that contribute to it. Falls is a great example. Okay. It can be your vision. It can be the medications you're on. It can be your strength. It can be your toenails curling over and so you can't feel the bottom of, where you are in space. I mean,
Mhm.
I think there are over 350 things that have been looked at as risk factors, and there are plenty that are out there. And some are within the body, okay, and others precipitated. So the cords that have proliferated since cables got into our lives. okay, cause falls. Throw rugs, throw you. I mean, they cause falls. So you need to look at the person and you need to look at the environment to be able to really decrease falls.
Yep. Yep. Oh, so important. Thank you
And
for sharing that.
yeah, my pleasure. And balance, we don't think about when I tell people to go to physical therapy. I can walk, I don't need it. Well, there are balance exercises that can change your life. So and as you get older, and I don't know why, there is a decrease in balance. So the test that the police use, they
Mhm.
pull you over and want to see if you're drunk driving,
Yep.
and they have you do heel to toe walking. There is hardly an older person who would pass that test.
Mm.
Don't have the balance to do it. If you put your feet apart from each other, you can get the balance, but right next to each other, not at all.
Yeah. So is that normal aging to
That is
struggle with
normal.
that balance? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good to know. But there's exercise we can do.
Yes, there's exercise you can do.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
My mom's gotten really into pickleball lately, and she
Oh,
actually she actually read this book that I don't know the title, but essentially it's a book of like how to not fall and hurt yourself while playing pickleball.
oh my God, I've got to
Yep.
find that
I know. I know.
book.
I'll email you the when I
Yeah.
ask her about the exact title, but she's seen a lot of her peers, my mom's, getting close to 70, where they've fallen and have hurt themselves while playing a game that they love. So she's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I know that they're
Yep.
need to put things in place. Yeah.
And there are fall programs out there at
Mhm.
community centers all over that have been shown if you do this, this, and this, it's very likely you'll decrease your chances of falling. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. So helpful.
that's great. I'm so glad she's playing pickleball.
I know.
That's
I
great.
know she's found like this new love, which is really fun. And it's social, right? She's met
Yes.
friends through pickleball and is getting out and about, which is great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's been really fun. You talk about technology a little bit, and I think one of the maybe the sentences I pulled out was certain devices can improve and make a difference in the quality of our lives. And but we have to recognize, right, what's helpful, what's not helpful. Are you finding, I'm sure you're seeing so much, I was at CES, which is the Consumer Electronic show in January. AARP has their Age Tech Collaborative, which was exciting to see. So there's so much happening in that space. How are you seeing tech used in ways that help us maintain our independence? That is a big question because it's like there's so much out there, but just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll start with something that you don't usually think of as tech, but
Mm.
people don't want to give up the keys to their car. We know
Oh, yeah.
that, okay? If you buy a new car, if you have an old car and you get a new car, there are so many new safety measures in
Mm.
that car that can help you overcome some of the things that happen as you get older. So one thing is you can't turn your neck back as much as you used to. Everybody has cervical arthritis. Okay. So you got a camera. It shows you what's in back of you. It
Yeah.
beeps when somebody walks by. You've got something on the side that tells you when there's a car passing you. I mean,
Mhm.
there are so many things like that that exist that it's worth getting a new car.
Right.
Okay. Or a newer car.
Yeah.
Trade it in.
It is, I even find it so helpful if I'm trying to parallel park, which I'm horrible at. But it helps me get it done, that's for sure.
Yep.
Uh, Another piece of what I loved that you pulled out of that was how we can support our loved ones, right? Or what to think of for our loved ones. And as family caregivers, we want to be that support system, right, for the people that we're caring for to help them navigate those aging years. What practical advice does honest aging offer? And I know it does in like every category, but what are your hopes for what families can really learn and pull out of that? And, I guess the side question of that is we not only are witnessing our loved ones grow older, which can be joyful and challenging at the same time, right? Bring up a lot of emotion. But I also think it almost holds up this mirror for us that it does impact then how we view aging, right? And how do we make peace with that a little bit?
It's a lot of questions.
I
So we'll
know.
start. This is
I was
one.
on a tangent. Thank you.
So, the book has these sections.
Mm.
And part of why I put the sections in for loved ones is that a lot of the issues that come up are difficult issues to discuss with your parents or somebody you love who is older. They can
Mm.
be embarrassing. They can make somebody feel like they're being infantilized.
Mm.
There's a lot of, so you've got to tread lightly and figure out why you're bringing it up. And I think, the biggest thing is, so what? Why does this matter so much?
Yeah.
And try and figure out if it really does or if it's just another one of those things. You got to figure out what battles are worth having, fighting,
Yeah.
okay, and which ones aren't. Look at the big picture. Don't be in the weeds too much. And then the second piece of this to me is people have different opinions because they're looking at things differently. And older people are adults. They've been making their own decisions for a very long time, and they made decisions for you for a very long time.
And that is
And
true.
yes, and you both have to put yourself in the other's shoes
Mm.
and understand what it is you're trying to get out of this. Try and get away from the specifics. And what's the big picture? It gives me joy. It's something I want to do. Why? It's meaningful to me. And try and come to a place where you really have heard each other. And then I think it's easier to figure out how to proceed on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And, because they're tough. I'm not pretending they're not tough. Okay. And there's also a concern as some people develop some cognitive impairment, whether they have the ability to make certain decisions. And I think you have to realize that most people retain the ability to make decisions about who they want to make their healthcare decisions if they can't make it for themselves. Whereas they may not be able to truly understand why they should or shouldn't have this surgery. So there are different levels of decision making that it's important that people realize,
Right. Right. Yeah. There's definitely a relationship dynamic at play in all of that.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, yes. So much of it is, what was your relationship before any of this happened? You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
that can play a huge role. I have people whose parents are across the country who are trying to micromanage because they're feeling badly they're not there.
Yeah.
Figuring out why you're doing what you're doing is really important, and letting people have the most joy they possibly can.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. How are you looking forward to the developments in geriatrics and what's happening in this landscape? I'm sure, right? You said how many years? Was it 30 years in the field, 40 years in the field?
40 years in the field.
40 years in the field. That it's evolved quite a
Oh
bit.
my God, yes, yes. And there's a lot to go, okay? People have been very loath to accept that there are differences between 80-year-olds and 60-year-olds, but there are, it's real.
Isn't that
And
one of your chapters too, right?
yes, and it's not that it's 80 versus 60 instead of 85 and 55. It's just as you get older, things change. That's the metric. It's gonna change.
Mhm.
What I'm not excited about is all this stuff I see about people trying to live to 150.
Mm.
I think that's unconscionable, quite honestly.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the longevity movement. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we live in a world with limited resources. We
Mhm.
bring new people in, we have to give them a chance. Okay. And if I'm around till I'm 150, which I have no desire to be, I'm taking up space and resources and keeping them from them. So I don't think that's what it is. But I am excited about new ways to improve the quality of our lives, however many years we have. And I see some really good things happening there.
Mm.
So, just new ways to do surgery that are so much easier than what they used to be. So I have he's now 94-year-old, who's going to be going out on the golf course in a few weeks
Mm.
because at 93, he got his new hip.
Wow.
Got his new hip because he wanted to go out on the golf course. Okay. So it's what matters to him. And that's really important to me. We have new medications that can really, I mean, I've had some people with terrible heart failure for different reasons get a whole lot better because of these new medications that are out. I'm not against everything that's new, but it's got to be qualitatively better than what's out there now for what the costs are. We can't bankrupt the system either. And I think there's a movement within geriatrics to get everybody to think about. I have a friend who says, she goes to the doctor and she does her organ recital. And it took me a minute to understand what that meant.
Yeah.
My eyes, my ears, all that. To what we in geriatrics are now calling the 5 M's. And the first of the 5 M's is matters most. What matters most to the person who's being affected by all this? What do they want? Okay, your medical care is in service to you.
Yeah.
It's not in service to a number. It's not in service to a hemoglobin A1C. It's what allows you to do what's meaningful, what matters to you, okay, and enjoyable, hopefully.
Yes.
So those are the things we want to hear from patients. This is what matters to me. And when I take this pill, doing this and this, and it's getting in the way, okay, I just don't want that. We need to have those discussions. And then the next things that we need to think about, whatever organ you're dealing with, is what it does to the mind and the mood, what it does to mobility and ability to get around, or your likelihood of falling. We have drugs we call FRIDs, fall risk increasing drugs, okay? So whether that happens, medications, just medications in general, they can be miracles, as I just talked about, and they can be toxins.
Yeah.
So what medications do you really need? And to make sure there's an indication for every medication and you're taking it at the lowest dose that does what it needs to do for you, And then lastly is this multi-complexity. All right, that's the last M. And that's looking at the big picture. So one of the reasons I love geriatrics is that besides my grandmother, I find it the most interesting medicine and complex medicine I could possibly practice.
Wow.
Because I have people, first of all, no older person is like any other older person. Their lives have been so different that you look at 385-year-olds and you're looking at 385-year-olds. Okay, they're very different. And then the medical studies and evidence oftentimes ignore my patients. So I don't know if these apply to them or not. I don't know if the benefit is more or less, and if the risk is more or less. And then there's what they want and where they live and who they have to help them. So you got to put it all together into a package. But it's incredibly, it feels good.
It does. It does. I was going to say, it's like you're an investigator.
Yes,
Pulling
yes, we are.
everything together, which is so fascinating, right? Interesting to do that. Well, as you were talking, I wrote down the 5 M's, and that is like my golden nugget out of this. I'm taking that. That is such a great framework to think through. Okay, all of those different components so that we can really age really well. Remember that. Martha Stewart endorsed your book, which is so fun. How did that come together?
Martha years ago gave a donation to our practice in honor of her mother, who was seen by us for a little while and who was an amazing woman, absolutely amazing woman. And she has continued to be a donor to us. And so she has given galas for us. And, she looked at the book and read it through. And she liked it.
Yeah, good. Oh, that was fun. I know. I think someone, we had that conversation on your team. She was like, you have to ask about this fun tidbit. Oh, so good. Well, as we close our time today, what is maybe one message you really hope our listeners walk away with as we're all figuring this out every day?
I'm going to give you 2, okay? First one is resist ageism. No matter what age you are, don't let people get away with it.
Yeah.
If you see somebody calling an older person cutie, and the older person doesn't look like they want to be called cutie, but looks like they're afraid to say something, because you get put in these power situations, say something. If the clerk looks at you and the other person was there first, say something, be there. The second is what we said at the very beginning. It's usually not aging itself, but it's how you and your loved ones react to aging. That's the major influence on what your old age will be. So think about all the positives and what you can do with those 20 to 40 years. The do-overs, the new things you always wanted to do.
The new adventure, the new dreams, we can continually do that.
Sure.
So where can we learn more? Where can we buy your book and connect with you?
I have a website, which is Rosanne, ROSANNE, MD.com. And there's lots of stuff on there. You can get the book on there. You can get the book on Amazon, of course.
Thank you. Well, and I will also include that in our episode description for people listening. They can scroll down or up, I never know which way, and click on the link and be directed to that. This has been so fun. And the fact that we got to meet today and have this time to visit, I'll remember that. And it's so special to me to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Are you looking for another encouraging podcast? Let me introduce you to my friend Elizabeth Miller, the host of the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast. She visits with family caregivers and dives into their caregiving and self-care strategies. She also highlights that family caregivers are the experts in caregiving. Beyond the informative conversation, Elizabeth reveals the tried and true resources and practical self-care tips that empower caregivers to prioritize their health and happiness. You can find the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast wherever you download your favorite podcast, or go to her website, www.happyhealthycaregiver.com. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.